There is a certain kind of person who can turn a simple disagreement into something so confusing you eventually forget what the conversation started about. You raise a valid concern, and somehow, within minutes, you find yourself apologizing for bringing it up in the first place at all. Most people assume miscommunication is simply an accident, two people failing to understand each other clearly during an otherwise normal, harmless conversation together. But for certain people, twisting a conversation is not an accident at all. It is a practice skill they use without even realizing it. Today we are going to decode the psychology of people who twist every conversation and why arguing with them always leaves you feeling defeated. Psychologists describe this pattern using a concept called gaslighting, a form of manipulation that makes another person doubt their own perception of reality. Researcher Elizabeth Loftus demonstrated decades ago that human memory is remarkably suggestible, and false details can be planted through repeated confident suggestion alone. People who twist conversations exploit this exact vulnerability, repeating their version of events so confidently that your own memory slowly begins to feel unreliable. So where does this pattern actually come from, and why do certain people rely on distortion instead of simply having an honest conversation? Some psychologists suggest this behavior develops as a defense mechanism, protecting a fragile ego from ever having to sit with genuine fault or blame. Admitting wrongdoing requires tolerating uncomfortable feelings, and for someone with a fragile sense of self, that discomfort feels unbearable, even dangerous to experience. So instead of tolerating that discomfort, their mind reflexively reaches for distortion, twisting the narrative until the discomfort belongs to someone else instead. Over time, this becomes an automatic pattern, not always consciously planned, but reinforced every single time it successfully redirects blame away from them. Let us break down the clearest signs of someone who consistently twists conversations, starting with the pattern most people recognize first without naming it. Sign 1. Turning the tables, where the moment you raise a concern about their behavior, the conversation suddenly becomes about your behavior instead. Researchers studying gaslighting describe this exact pattern, where perpetrators smoothly redirect conversations about their own actions into attacks on the person raising them. You might bring up feeling hurt, only to suddenly find yourself defending your own tone, your own timing, or your own past mistakes instead. This tactic is remarkably effective because it forces you to abandon your original point entirely just to defend yourself against a brand new accusation. Sign 2. Selective memory, where they confidently deny saying or doing something you clearly remember, insisting your version of events simply never happened. This denial is not always a deliberate lie. Sometimes it reflects a genuine, distorted memory, but the effect on you remains exactly the same. Repeated denial, even when sincere, plants seeds of doubt, making you question whether your own memory can be trusted during future conversations together. Sign 3. Minimizing your feelings, where a real hurt gets reduced to an overreaction, framed as you being too sensitive or too dramatic. A comment that genuinely hurt you gets reframed as a joke you misunderstood, quietly shifting responsibility for the pain back onto your own perception. Over time, you may start preemptively softening your own feelings before even expressing them, anticipating that they will be minimized or dismissed anyway. Sign 4. Moving the goalposts, where every time you meet their expectation, the standard quietly shifts, leaving satisfaction permanently just out of reach. You apologize for one thing, only to be told the real issue was actually something else entirely, something you never even knew existed. This creates an exhausting cycle where resolution never truly arrives, because the actual target of the conversation keeps shifting just beyond your grasp. Sign 5. Reframing intent as fact, where they confidently tell you what you were really thinking or feeling, regardless of what you actually said. Cognitive psychologists refer to this as a form of mind-reading distortion, assuming certainty about another person's internal state without any real evidence. When someone repeatedly tells you what you truly meant, it becomes exhausting to keep correcting them, and eventually many people simply stop trying. Sign 6. Using confidence as proof, where they state distorted claims with such total certainty that the sheer confidence itself becomes strangely convincing. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect, where repeated, confident statements begin to feel true simply because of how often and firmly they are said. Even when you know a claim is inaccurate, hearing it stated with total conviction repeatedly can quietly erode your own certainty over time. Sign 7. Weaponizing selective evidence, where they highlight one true detail to distract from a much larger pattern of dishonesty or distortion. By anchoring the conversation to one small, verifiable fact, they make their entire distorted narrative feel more credible than it actually deserves to be. Sign 8. False equivalence, where they compare a minor mistake of theirs to a completely different, much larger issue you originally raised. You mentioned feeling dismissed during an argument, and suddenly they bring up an unrelated mistake you made months ago instead of addressing it. This tactic derails accountability entirely, turning a focused conversation into a chaotic tally of unrelated grievances that never actually resolves the original concern. Sign 9. Semantic games, where they argue over the exact wording you used instead of engaging with the actual meaning behind your concern. You say they hurt your feelings, and they respond by insisting they never use that specific word, avoiding the substance of what you meant entirely. This shifts the conversation from addressing genuine harm toward a technical debate about vocabulary, exhausting you long before the real issue gets discussed. Sign 10. Preemptive discrediting, where they tell others in advance that you tend to exaggerate or misremember things, undermining your credibility before conflict even begins. This tactic is particularly damaging because it means that even when you accurately describe what happened, others may already doubt your account beforehand. Researchers studying coercive control note that isolating a person from outside validation often begins with quietly discrediting them to shared friends or family. Let us look closer at how this pattern shows up specifically inside romantic relationships, where emotional intimacy makes these distortions even harder to detect. A partner may frequently reframe your concerns as insecurity or jealousy, subtly positioning themselves as patient while you appear irrational or overly sensitive instead. Over time, you may find yourself constantly questioning whether your concerns are valid, since every attempt to raise them gets quietly reframed against you. This same pattern appears at work too, where a colleague may consistently reframe missed deadlines as team failures rather than acknowledging their own responsibility. Meetings can become subtly exhausting, since raising a legitimate concern often results in the conversation quietly shifting toward your communication style instead. Family relationships often show this pattern earliest, since a parent may reframe every boundary a child sets as disrespect rather than healthy self-advocacy. A simple request for space can trigger a reframed narrative where the child becomes ungrateful, while the parent positions themselves as endlessly patient instead. Adult children raised in this environment often become highly skilled at defending themselves preemptively, anticipating distortion before a conversation has even fully begun. Now that we understand these 10 signs across relationships, it becomes easier to see why this pattern feels so uniquely exhausting compared to open disagreement. Open disagreement, however uncomfortable, still allows both perspectives to exist, while distortion insists that only one version of events is ever allowed to be true. Psychologists note that shared reality, the basic human need to have your experience confirmed by others, is deeply disrupted by repeated conversational distortion. This explains why people trapped in these dynamics often describe feeling unmoored, as though their own perception can no longer be trusted at all. Let us return now to practical solutions. Because awareness alone rarely changes the dynamic, you also need concrete tools to protect your daily clarity. Ninth, practice naming the pattern silently to yourself in the moment, recognizing redirection, minimizing, or reframing as it happens, rather than after the fact. Naming it internally, even without saying it aloud, interrupts the automatic spiral of self-doubt that conversational distortion is specifically designed to trigger. 10th, avoid engaging with false equivalences directly, instead calmly stating that you are happy to discuss that separately, but not right now. This keeps the original concern from being buried under unrelated grievances, allowing you to maintain focus on the actual issue you raised. 11th, resist semantic debates by restating the meaning behind your words rather than defending the exact phrasing you originally chose to use. You might say, regardless of the specific words, "Here is how it made me feel," redirecting focus back toward the substance of the issue. 12th, build a support network outside the relationship. Since preemptive discrediting relies heavily on isolating you from people who might validate your experience. Maintaining close relationships with people who know you well creates a natural safeguard against attempts to undermine your credibility before conflict even starts. 13th, consider therapy specifically trained in gaslighting and coercive control patterns, since a professional can help you rebuild trust in your own perception. Therapists trained in these dynamics can help you recognize distortion tactics in real time, reducing the confusion these patterns are specifically designed to create. 14th, watch closely for genuine openness to correction rather than temporary agreement, since real change requires consistent honesty, not simply avoiding conflict momentarily. Someone unwilling to acknowledge distortion, despite repeated calm conversations, is showing you clearly how they intend to handle every future disagreement between you. This information is valuable, painful as it may feel, because it allows you to make decisions based on consistent reality rather than hopeful assumptions. 15th, remember that you are allowed to end a conversation the moment it turns into a debate over your memory rather than the actual issue. Walking away from a distorted conversation is not avoidance, it is a reasonable response to a dynamic that was never designed to reach resolution. 16th, remind yourself regularly that your feelings do not require someone else's agreement in order to be valid, real, and worth expressing clearly. Validation from within is slower to build than validation from others, but it becomes far more stable once it is genuinely established over time. Their own confidence in their perception slowly erodes, since every attempt to trust their memory gets met with confident denial or clever reframing. They may begin recording conversations, writing things down immediately, or asking others to confirm what happened, simply to trust their own experience again. This constant need for external validation is exhausting, and it slowly teaches a person to distrust one of their most basic human abilities. Understanding this pattern is the first step toward protecting yourself, because clarity removes the fog that conversational distortion depends on in order to survive. Here is the most important reframe. Disagreement over facts is normal, but a consistent pattern of rewriting reality is something entirely different altogether. Healthy people can misremember details occasionally, but they remain open to correction rather than doubling down with increasing confidence when clearly challenged. The presence of genuine openness to being wrong is the difference between an honest mistake and a deliberate, repeated pattern of reality distortion. So how can someone recognize this pattern clearly and respond in a way that protects their own mental and emotional clarity going forward? First, keep a written record of important conversations, since researchers recommend documenting details immediately to counter the effects of repeated, confident denial. A simple note with the date, what was said, and how you felt creates an anchor that distorted retellings cannot easily erase over time. Second, refuse to debate your own memory endlessly, since prolonged arguing over what happened often serves only to exhaust and confuse you further. You can simply state, "I remember it differently," and choose not to engage in an endless loop designed to wear down your certainty. Third, separate the original issue from the redirection, gently steering the conversation back to your initial concern instead of defending a new accusation. A simple phrase like this can help. We can discuss that separately, but right now I want to finish talking about my original concern. Fourth, seek outside perspective from trusted friends, family, or a licensed therapist, since isolation makes distorted conversations significantly harder to recognize clearly. A therapist trained in gaslighting and coercive control patterns can help you separate genuine misunderstanding from a repeated, deliberate pattern of distortion. Fifth, trust your own physical and emotional reactions, since confusion, dread, or exhaustion during conversations often signal distortion long before your mind names it. Your body frequently notices manipulation before your conscious mind fully processes it, making physical awareness a valuable early warning signal worth trusting. Sixth, avoid over-explaining yourself repeatedly, since conversational distortion often thrives on your anxious need to clarify things that never needed clarifying at all. Say what you need to say once, clearly and calmly, then resist the urge to keep justifying a truth that should not require repetition. Seventh, decide in advance what level of distortion you will tolerate, since clarity before conflict is far easier than clarity during the conflict itself. A simple internal rule might sound like this: if my memory is consistently denied without any real openness to being wrong, I will disengage. Eighth, remember that setting a boundary is not the same as punishing someone. Boundaries exist to protect your own clarity, not to control them. The goal is never to prove you are right in every single conversation, since some people simply will not accept a shared version of events. Instead, the goal is protecting your own internal compass, trusting your memory and your feelings even when someone else confidently insists otherwise entirely. This approach protects your own integrity, ensuring that even inside a confusing conversation, you remain someone who trusts their own honest perception. Healing from this pattern often takes time, especially if distorted conversations felt familiar long before this particular relationship in your life began. Be patient with yourself as you rebuild trust in your own memory, since a mind shaped by repeated doubt does not heal overnight completely. Small progress counts. Noticing the pattern once is progress. Writing something down once is progress. Trusting your own memory once is real progress. Surround yourself, where possible, with people who communicate honestly, since experiencing clear, consistent conversations can slowly retrain your expectations towards something healthier. Over time, you may notice you no longer panic the moment someone challenges your memory, because you trust your own perception enough to stay calm. This is the quiet transformation healing brings, not the absence of disagreement, but the presence of steadiness inside conversations that once confused you. You begin trusting your own perception again, no longer needing someone else's confident denial to confirm whether your memory and feelings are valid. That shift alone can change every relationship you enter afterward, because you stop mistaking someone else's confidence for a verdict on your own reality. Remember, the people who truly respect you will allow disagreement without needing to rewrite what actually happened between you in the first place. Healthy conversation looks completely different. It feels like being heard, not corrected. It feels like clarity, not the exhausting fog of constant confusion. Learning that difference may be one of the most protective lessons you carry into every relationship you build for the rest of your life. And if you have ever recognized some of these patterns in yourself, know that awareness is the first step toward genuine growth and honesty. It is never too late to replace defensive distortion with honest accountability, even if that honesty feels uncomfortable the very first few times. Growth rarely looks graceful in the beginning. It looks like small, awkward moments of admitting fault that slowly become easier with consistent practice. Whether you have experienced this pattern or recognize it in yourself, the path forward is the same. Choose honesty, choose clarity, choose real connection. Consider keeping a private log of recurring incidents, since patterns are far easier to trust once you can see them written clearly over time. Notice also how your own body responds during these conversations, since tension, dread, or exhaustion often signal distortion before your mind consciously names it. Trusting your body's signals alongside your written observations creates a clearer, more reliable picture than relying on memory alone during confusing moments. Remember that leaving, distancing, or setting firm boundaries does not require the other person's agreement, understanding, or acknowledgement of the distortion they have caused. Your clarity is not conditional on someone else finally admitting fault. Sometimes protecting yourself simply means trusting what you already clearly know to be true. This clarity, once earned, becomes one of the most valuable tools you carry into every future conversation, professional, familial, and romantic alike. You deserve conversations where honesty flows both ways, where facts are shared rather than rewritten, and where your memory is treated as valid. None of this makes you difficult or overly sensitive. It simply means you are finally choosing to trust yourself as much as you trust others. That choice, small as it may seem in the moment, is often where real healing and real change quietly begins to take root. Take a moment now to notice which of these 10 signs felt the most familiar from your own recent conversations with people close to you. Awareness of a single pattern can shift how you respond the very next time a conversation begins to feel confusing or unfairly redirected. You do not need to confront every distortion in the moment. Sometimes simply noticing it internally is enough to protect your own clarity. Over weeks and months, small moments of noticed distortion accumulate into a much clearer picture of the actual pattern shaping a relationship or friendship. This clearer picture allows you to make decisions from a place of calm understanding rather than confusion, guilt, or constant, exhausting self-doubt. Some relationships will improve once this pattern is named and addressed directly, especially if the other person is genuinely willing to reflect honestly. Other relationships may not change, and recognizing that difference early can save you significant emotional energy over the months and years that follow. Either outcome is valuable information, since both allow you to make grounded choices instead of hoping a pattern will simply resolve itself eventually. Remember that seeking clarity is not the same as seeking conflict. Sometimes the calmest response is simply noticing the pattern and quietly stepping back. Your peace of mind does not require winning every argument. It only requires trusting your own honest perception of what actually took place. As you practice these tools consistently, conversations that once left you confused will start to feel more manageable, even when they remain uncomfortable. This is not because the other person necessarily changes, but because your own relationship to your memory and feelings becomes steadier over time. That steadiness is the real goal here, not controlling how someone else communicates, but protecting how clearly you understand your own experience. Give yourself credit for noticing these patterns at all, since recognizing subtle distortion takes far more awareness than most people realize or acknowledge. The fact that you are here, learning about this pattern, already shows a level of self-awareness that will serve you well going forward. Trust that awareness, build on it slowly, and allow yourself the grace of imperfect practice as you apply these tools in real conversations. Healing is rarely linear. Some conversations will still leave you doubting yourself, and that is a normal part of unlearning an old pattern. With time and consistent practice, those moments of doubt should become less frequent, replaced gradually by a steadier, more grounded sense of trust. Real accountability does not require perfection, it only requires a genuine willingness to sit with discomfort instead of redirecting it towards someone else. If this video helped you recognize a pattern in your own life, leave a comment sharing which of the 7 signs felt the most familiar. And remember, trusting your own memory and feelings is not stubbornness, it is simply the foundation of every honest and healthy relationship you deserve. If this video gave you a new way to understand a confusing conversation, please like this video and share it with someone who needs it. Someone out there is currently doubting their own memory after a confusing conversation, and your share might be exactly the clarity they need right now. Thank you for staying with us until this very moment, watching all the way through a topic that touches so many quiet, confusing conversations. I'm Apex. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next journey into understanding the hidden patterns of human behavior. Goodbye for now, and I will see you again very soon in another exploration of the psychology hiding quietly beneath everyday human conversation.